Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Table Talk. I'm your host, Jake Combs, and tonight we are going to be looking at this is our second video this week for the Warhammer Horus Heresy new releases. Now, these items are available for pre-order. Specifically, we're going to be looking at the Liber Hereticus and the Liber Astartes. And so let's go ahead and get started. Now, to begin with, these were sent to us by Games Workshop for the purpose of this video. So I want to say thank you to them for sharing these with us. And then both of these are essentially the equivalent of the various codexes or codices, depending on how you want to phrase it. I believe codices is the proper way, from what I've been told. But this is that version for Horus Heresy, but because the Horus Heresy is literally only two sides of a fight and there's no other armies out there, at least not yet, so we only have the two books. So one, the Liber Hereticus, covers all of the traitor Space Marine legions, and then the Liber Astartes is all the loyal Space Marine legions. Now, these books, they look thick. They are very, very heavy. Some of the heaviest books I've ever actually picked up. So, we're going to go ahead and get started. Now, for me, I have always been a fan of Chaos, and so naturally, I would gravitate towards the Traitor Legions. Now, it's not that I don't like Space Marines. I think that as far as the hobby's concerned, given how few their number are compared to the rest of the galaxy, my biggest issue is that too many people simply play them. I don't have really anything against the idea of the Emperor and the Golden Throne or anything like that, but for me it's more about the aesthetic and kind of paving your own path, which is, what Chaos really has been all about, where, being a loyalist, you're following the Emperor's only path, where, sure, you are kind of bound by the gods, but at the same time, they allow you to make room for your own goals, your own machinations, so things like that. So, and then aesthetically, the followers of Chaos are always much more interesting, much more evil, dark, and basically the kind of stuff that I really enjoy when it comes to the hobby part of it. And as far as visually, and the loyalist side has always just been a little too plain for me. So, I know that today we are have also released the unboxing video for the new Horus Heresy edition. And with that, one thing to follow up is, if you have watched that video already, the entire box set is basically meant to be two forces, or can actually be used as one single force, and basically you decide which that's going to be. And so it gives you a little bit more room for modifying it, tweaking it to match whichever one you want. And we've got only one dreadnought, we've got one I believe it was a Land Raider, and then just a ton of Space Marines. And what I thought was interesting about it is that the Space Marines themselves, they're all pretty much identical. And when you're looking real closely on the pictures, you really see that, other than the color. And that's just because, this early into their never-ending war, Chaos hasn't really tainted them yet and hasn't changed how they look overall. So, even the bad guys still look like the good guys. So I can imagine, seeing these wars happen, and it'd be real confusing to follow, which side is the one to root for, and depending on which one you prefer, obviously, is the one that you're going to go for. But let's go ahead and get started. So it is a nice, sturdy hardcover. And one thing that you may notice is we do have the little ribbon bookmark in here. I love when they put those in there. I wish all of the hardcover codices and Battle Army books came with those. And then excuse me. They've got a nice little table breakdown that basically shows you, who are their allies, who are their enemies, and who's more neutral. Now, honestly, what I was expecting is with most codices, you're going to have about 30 to 50 pages of lore. And here we are already on page 18, and we're already into the stats and the rules for the characters. So I think that the reason for doing that is more because with the Horus Heresy, there are so many books now. I stopped reading back on book 21, and they have so many more since then. And so to try to compress that entire story into a lore section of one of these books, is definitely not going to do the story justice. And so I suspect that's why they've deviated from their normal practice to go pretty much jump straight into it with this. Now we're just going to skip through. We're not going to look too closely at the stats because I honestly have no frame of reference to base them on, or to compare them against, rather, because this is my first foray into Horus Heresy. So we're just skipping some big sections here just to see if we can find, once we get to something different. And actually overshot a little bit. All right, so just on stats alone, it goes until page 93. That is a ton of stats. Now, what I'm willing to bet is if we took that section and compared it to the Liber Astartes, I'm willing to bet that they're going to be pretty much the same for those 80 some odd pages, just because of how similar the forces are. Now, you might have a couple units here and there that are specific only to one faction or the other, and so for example, I don't have any actual unit examples, but like Space Wolves in 40K, have they can have like a wolf pack where they're really the only ones, and I can't remember which force it is. I believe it's Thousand Suns. Has the Rubric Marines, and so those kind of more exclusive units. I don't know if we're going to see a lot of those in these books. And actually, let's check out the glossary and just see if there's anything listed there. And actually, there is not a glossary. So let's see about table of contents, maybe. All right. Okay, so we do have like specific groupings for the actual factions themselves. So like once we get to the appendices, which that's right where we're at with page 94, 95, that goes until page 140, and then that's when we start breaking into the individual teams. So like we have the rules for Fulgrim with the Emperor's Children, Phoenix Terminator Squad. For Iron Warriors, we have Perturbo. I always screw up his name. So there's a lot of individual things. So like I was kind of guessing at, and so like Thousand Suns, Magnus the Red. Just taking a glance, we do not have the rubric Marines. But I have a suspicion that that's because they weren't a thing until closer to 40k. Now, one thing that has always confused me, because in the books I've never really read anything about the Alpha Legion, but I also don't read a lot of 40k books, and like based on some of the groups that I'm in on social media that are also hobby groups, a lot of people treat the Alpha Legion almost like it's kind of like, like one of those secret societies, and that, everyone kind of jokes about that they exist, but they don't really. And then some people kind of ran away with it. Now, based on that limited knowledge, looking at this list, seeing the Alpha Legion here, one has me excited just because I love some of those memes. I mean, some of that stuff is hilarious. But it also tells me that they've actually been a full Legion from the beginning. It's just a lot of their stuff is kind of more in secrecy. So here we are in the appendix. Now, in here, I actually want to see. Okay, so it doesn't say. I was just curious if the book listed the price, because based on the size of this book, I'm willing to bet that you're probably going to be paying like $100 per copy, just based on the fact that you depending on where you go, like just to get a codex by itself, you're looking anywhere from 30 to 50. And so the fact that this has, 9 legions, and the other book has 9 legions as well, I'm willing to bet that you're going to be paying a lot more for this book because it has all of them in there. But one thing that makes it much easier in this game versus 40k is that the individual legions don't have all of their special rules that they get in 40k. So like I can't think of them off the top of my head for 40k, but in Age of Sigmar, like your Maggotkin of Nurgle, they have an ability where anyone that's close to them basically starts getting sick and suffering wounds just by being in close proximity to the rot. And so like you don't have abilities like that here just yet because they haven't fully given themselves over to chaos, at least some of the factions yet. Now, I do like some of the artwork that they've done. I mean, it's very cinematic. I mean, seriously looks like it's something that's pulled from a movie. Now, the order of the book, I think, is a little interesting because, we go through the main rules and stats for generic Marines, and then we go into the appendix, which typically the appendix is at the very end. And then we go into the individual legions. And one thing that really surprises me, though, is so far through this, there's not a lot of images of the actual models. Makes me wonder if maybe the book was written and compiled and prepared long ahead of the models were, so that maybe they weren't able to actually get like studio models set up in larger numbers for those images. Okay, so what's interesting here is, so we're looking at the Emperor's Children, specifically Warlord Traits. Now we have a Traitor trait and a Loyalist trait. And so that tells me that most likely you're going to be able to play as Loyalist or Traitor with the same force. So you could easily, kind of treat it, earlier in the war, and have it be more like a training battle type thing, and have them be Loyalist for that fight, and then next time you play, have them be Traitor. It's definitely a very interesting dynamic that they've added to this that I'm not used to. Now, I don't know if this is something new to the game or if this is something just new to me, because like I said, this is my first foray into Horus Heresy as far as the game is concerned. And then, like right here, we have Fulgrim, and surprisingly, there's no pictures of the models still. And here we get some, like example colors for the Emperor's Children. And it's going to be very much the same thing for the other legions, like Thousand Sons. And actually, okay, so I was mistaken. So once you get past those, you do actually get the painted examples of the main different units. Now, I love the pose of this Captain Lucius, as well as Fulgrim. I mean, the Primarch models have so much style, so much I guess kind of like a cinematic quality to the models themselves. I mean, look at Fulgrim right there. I mean, I know this isn't a new model, but I mean, it's so dynamic. He's in action. He's jumping off of that body, going into a fight, and so they definitely look like they're going to be a lot cooler to have on like your bookshelf. And I would love to actually be able to paint all of the Primarchs. That is a personal goal for myself one day, is to get and paint all of them. Is it likely to happen? Probably not, due to the price tag. And I try to be more economical with my hobby, so that way the more models that I have, that I paint, I'm sure I'll put some of them on the shelf, but I like to also be able to use them in game. And with Horus Heresy, it's not one of those games that I really play, at least not yet. I mean, time's only going to tell on this, but with with all the other games that I play right now, like Necromunda, 40K, Age of Sigmar, Warcry, Aeronautica Imperialis, with those being my main ones, there's already a lot of hobby in my life. So, doing extras just to put them on display, will take me away from those. So it's very hard to find a balance where that really works for me. Let's see. Now the Horus Heresy Mortarion, I definitely am not that big of a fan of his model compared to some of the others. It doesn't have that dynamic posing. It kind of looks like he's more like using his scythe on like a field of wheat more than anything else. And the actual 40k Mortarion just looks so much more awesome. And if I was going to paint either one of them, it would be the 40k one. And here we are with the Thousand Suns. Magnus looks great in both versions, but again, I do also prefer the 40k version. Now, one thing. Okay, cool. So I was actually just about to ask or comment that I would really like to see a Horus Heresy Abaddon, because I've had yet to see that. And I'm looking at the Sons of Horus section, and he's one of the very first ones listed. Now, the new Sons of Horus Praetor looks fantastic. I love that model. I wish that some of the 40k stuff had similar armor designs to those, because those are some really great models. I mean, they would look great probably as like a captain or something of your force. And then the Praetor that actually comes in the new box looks even better, in my opinion. Here we are with the word bearers. And this is actually the first one that I've seen for Horus Heresy. And again, my understanding and knowledge of this game is very limited. All I have is really the books themselves to go on. And so, my understanding is that none of the factions are, tainted by chaos, at least fully. They're no real mutations yet. But right here with word bearers, we see the ascension towards chaos, the mutations happening, and so definitely some really cool pieces, especially the Argel Tall one. Definitely like the way that one's posed with the wings, and it definitely looks pretty awesome. And then lastly, we go into the Alpha Legion and Alfarius. That is an awesome model. Definitely one of the ones that I would be interested in painting for sure. Excuse me. So that is the Liber Hereticus in short. So then we're going to go ahead and open up the Liber Astartes, and we're going to take a look at the table of contents first, see how similar it is in design, and if it is pretty much the same in design, then we're just going to basically skip ahead to look at the different legions themselves. So we have, I'm looking at the table of contents now. We have the same setup with the rules, goes into the appendices or appendices. Word pronunciation is definitely not my strong suit today. Now, looking in it, we do have the 9 Loyalist legions, and one thing I find interesting is lately we've been getting some books for the Iron Snakes. We had a while ago, there was Brotherhood of the Snake or Brothers of the Snake, something like that, by Dan Abnett, and then there were 2 books that follow within the the Gaunt's Ghost storyline overall, and they're based on Erdesh, and that also had the Iron Snakes. So, makes me wonder, really how many Space Marine chapters there are. Because between the two books, we've got 18. And my understanding is that there were many more. Several of them were lost along the way. And so it makes me wonder, with that being the case, where are the Iron Snakes through all this? Because obviously, well, not obviously, my understanding is that no new legions were created. So it was, with the Iron Snakes being on Ithaca, being brought into this at some point, makes me wonder if they were one of the original ones that were created and then used by Dan Abnett and the other writer in those books, or if they were actually specifically created to be one of the lost legions. Definitely worth looking into for sure. I was hoping that they would be one of the ones listed in here, so that way I could see, how they were painted. Because, in the Brotherhood of the Snake and the two Erdesh books, they are some of the better written Space Marines. They have a lot more character, a lot more life, a lot more originality as far as how they work. They're meant to be sea hunters in space, which is kind of weird when I describe it like that, but it works really well. And they have different kind of training regimen that most others don't have, and so it's a very interesting group that I would love to hear more of. But again, I was really hoping that we'd get to see what they look like, basically, according to GW. But let's go ahead and skip ahead. Alright, so we're in the Loyalist section. So first one is Dark Angels. And I also just realized that Black Templars were not in this as well. So it makes me wonder where they're at through all this. The White Scars. And again, I know most of these models are not new, but they look pretty cool. Now, what I think is interesting is the jet bikes that the White Scars use in Horus Heresy look much more like the bikes that the Custodes or Custodes use, depending on how you want to pronounce them. And with that, it kind of seems like they took their design from these, where the normal Space Marine jet bike, is much bulkier and less streamlined. All right, next one is the Space Wolves. Now, Leman Russ looks, a lot less wolf-like than I expected. In all of the times that he's been talked about, I've always pictured this big bearded Space Marine, kind of looks like a Viking in a Space Marine suit, and this looks very, very different than what I was expecting. Next one is Imperial Fists with a Rogel Dorn. Now, personally, between them and the White Scars, they're probably some of the ones that I would use the least ever, just because typically painting yellow is really difficult, and also typically painting white for White Scars is also very difficult, and would want to deviate away from just the kind of vomit of color of a single color all over your troops, and make them something more unique. And then here we are with the Blood Angels. And I do really like the pose for Sanguinus. Then we have the Iron Hands. And then, of course, we have the Ultramarines with Gilliman. And then the last section is the Salamanders with Vulcan. Definitely like their look overall. Now, one thing I did not check, and I'm curious about for these, let's see, so for the Dark Angels, so since in Liber Hereticus we did have like some abilities listed that were both, traitor and loyalist for the same faction, I'm wondering if we might see something similar with this book. All right. So no, we don't actually have any that differentiate between the two, which kind of goes against my understanding, because I do remember reading that, with the Dark Angels, that there were rumors that, some of them had been tainted and that their homeworld had been lost, and so it's kind of a stain against the entire chapter. And so I was kind of hoping that we would see something like that where you could actually use them, based on the rules in like a tournament setting, use the basically use them to kind of fight against the other loyalists as well. So it kind of surprises me that we don't have that, based on the fact that there is talk of that in the lore, but overall these books are really cool. Now I'm hoping that, like, since the bulk of the books are the same as far as the overall information, the base stats, I'm hoping that they come out with like a smaller supplement where you can get just the legion that you don't have. So like if you buy one of these books, then you can get a smaller book that would have all the other legion rules and stats for those specific legions. So that way you'd be able to actually, have everything without having to get, two of these massive books to get all of that information. But overall, if you are a player of Horus Heresy, I definitely would recommend picking up one, if not both of these books. One obviously so that way you can use it to play, but as I always say whenever we're looking at the different codices, it's always a great idea to read up on the abilities, the stats, the weaponry, the tactics of your opponents, so that way if you do go to face one of them, you already have an idea of what they typically will use on the field, so that way you can kind of plan against that. So definitely something to keep in mind. But again, I want to say thank you to Games Workshop for sharing these with us. The books are really cool. Definitely looking forward to cracking them open, digging into them a little bit deeper. But thank you again, as always, for watching, everyone. We really do appreciate it, and I will see you guys next time. Thank you.